Chapter 9 lecture where we're going to discuss human resources and talent management. This is a very valuable chapter, and for those of you who have already taken the Management 2115 class, which is Human Resources Management, or you intend to, this is either a great primer or a great reinforcer from what you've already learned or what you are learn in the future. So let's get started. So we're going to discuss how HR and talent management are valuable parts of the business strategy, components of talent management. We're going to overview the recruitment and selection process and employee orientation, training, and development, explain the basics of performance evaluation systems, and go over a summary of how employees are compensated and the role of laborers in HR management. So let's get going. Human resources is the tie to business strategy is usually called strategic human resource management or talent management. Talent management is a broader view of the process. It encompasses more elements. And many organizations still have HR professionals that serve minor roles within the company. They're focused on, processing your payroll and filling out and filing government forms and recruiting your entry-level workers, selecting entry-level workers. Many organizations still have a very narrow and weakened view of HR. And so I am very passionate about the role of management and specifically, of course, the role of human resource management. Why? Because human resource managers are responsible for and very invested in our people, our employees. And when you're not focused on them, when you're only concerned about, all they do is do payroll, then why do you even have a human resources person in your company? You can just outsource it and actually save money. But additionally, if you're not really understanding their role, then guess what? Then you're not really seeing the value of your employees, especially not your entry-level workers. So human resource management contributes by helping to build high-performance work practices. And this is discussed in chapters 7 and 13 more extensively. And you have a lot of executives in human resource management, both present and, of course, former, who serve as outside directors on boards to really help other corporations understand the importance and value of your human resource personnel, but also the human resources that you have working on a daily basis within your company. And HR professionals should serve the role as partner in helping with strategy. They are not the dictator of, they are not to browbeat someone into complying with. They should really be a partner. And your CEO, the chief executive officer, the head of your organization, should really have by their side their HR professional. There should be a chief officer that is involved and responsible for human resources. And that's my opinion. That's the opinion of others in HR. It should not be a devalued role. It should be highly valued. You should have your chief operating officer that is handling the day-to-day operations, and they should be working with your HR person. Your HR person should be serving as a consultant to all the other managers within your company. So with the talent management model, on page 308, you'll see Exhibit 9.1, and it shows that talent management process, which is basically the staffing. And not all organizations are going to follow the same steps and the same sequence, but they may follow some of the steps. And so the arrows that point to retention in Exhibit 9.1 suggest that there's a major strategy of staffing that is used to retain your most valued employees, and that any aspect of talent management can contribute to retaining these employees. Turnover, as we've discussed before, is caused mostly when a person or and there's environmental factors, and those can be internal and external factors. There could be workplace factors. Sometimes a combination of 2 or 3 of these factors can actually cause employees to stop working as much or stop working at all, right? And that's that turnover. And so there's a study of HR managers that shows that 70% of them thought that employee retention was the primary concern, and that 40% reported an absolute increase in turnover. Is that not amazing? There's actually increase within their companies of turnover. What this signifies is that companies are not understanding and embracing the value and importance of employees within their company. They're seeing it as a cyclical process, and we can just churn them in and out rather than investing time, talent, and resources into building these employees up so that they have a long-standing legacy within the company. So chapter 7, we go into greater detail about job embeddedness, if you recall, and that's a combination of factors that influence employees to either stay with the company or jump ship and go elsewhere. There are various legal aspects that you have to take in consideration as a human resource manager and as a manager in general when you're considering human resource management. And some of those are affirmative action, and that's anti-discrimination laws that companies cannot discriminate against protected people. Those protected people include women, racial groups, religious groups, those with physical and mental limitations or special needs, those that are older groups, so you cannot discriminate based on age, and you cannot discriminate against someone's sexual orientation, preferences. You cannot discriminate against a person because of the military service. And you'll see further on 310 to 312 about that. And so there's various discriminatory practices under law that are covered on page 311. Those include harassment, retaliation, employment decisions based on various assumptions or stereotypes, and denying people employment because of their marriage or affiliation. With the harassment, that could be sexual harassment, that could be bullying, that can be a number of things. Retaliation, that can be where there's a whistleblower, where you saw something that was happening that was wrong, you reported it, and your manager or supervisor or whomever retaliated against you, either physically or by changing your work environment, or firing you, or docking your pay. Right? There's various retaliatory practices. Making an employment decision based on a stereotype or assumption. So because you decided not to hire someone because they were of a certain gender or race or religion, and you made an assumption based on stereotypes that you have learned and believed over the years about this individual, so you did not hire them. And the same can be true in reverse. You hired a person because stereotypes about black men being strong, and you figure, oh great, he'll be a great worker. I can work the mess out of him and get him to lift all of these heavy crates and cranes and boxes and so on and so forth. Denying someone an opportunity because of their marital status or association. So denying employment because you happen to find out in an interview that this person is a partner, has a spouse in a same-sex marriage, and you were against gay marriage. And so because of that, you don't hire them. Or denying them employment because they're married, and you don't want to deal with an employee who has to call off from work because of marital obligations, because there's only one car and the other car broke down, or because the child is sick and they need to be able to stay home with the child or whatever. Another denial of employment because of marriage is that you are so deeply holier than thou that you believe that by a certain age people should naturally be married. I'm just saying. And so when you find out that a person is 30 or 40 years old and they're not married, you may deny them employment because of that. What's wrong with them? There must be something wrong with them that they're not married. I was married at 21, and so you should have been married by now. So there's different ways in which a person can be denied employment because of marriage, association, affiliation, so on and so forth. There's possible remedies for these discriminatory practices, including you can get back pay. So for the time that you may have been retaliated against and they cut your hours or whatever, you could get back pay for the time you weren't at work. You can be promoted or possibly reinstated to your job. You can have your attorney's fees and court costs from going through the legal process reimbursed to you or covered. They'd actually have to pay the cost directly to the attorney in the court. You can also have compensatory and punitive damages paid to you for pain and suffering and lost wages. Now, there are strategic HRM and talent management planning, and you can plan for the future needs, future turnover, for recruitment, selection, and layoffs, and for any training and development. Recruitment. That's where you're going to find qualified employees who fit well into the culture of the organization. I'm going to say this again. To find qualified employees who fit well into the culture of the organization. You're not going to just find qualified employees who can do a job well, but how well do they fit into the culture of the organization? If your culture of the organization is very high-spirited and laid back and relaxed and casual and everyone is treating each other like cousins and brothers and sisters, you don't then hire a person who, although is qualified by resume, you don't hire someone who is ultra conservative, very rigid, very traditional, prefers a more traditional environment, is absolutely offended by the casual nature of a relaxed environment. You don't place that person in your more relaxed cultural environment, and vice versa. If you have a work environment that is very conservative and structured and everyone's buttoned up and just very rigid, you then don't hire a person who is very casual, laid back. They came to the interview with a dress shirt, but they had on some jeans, right? You don't bring them into your environment if you're expecting that kind of structure. You don't bring a person in who you can tell off the bat is very political in nature, right? Somehow they made some kind of slight about a political candidate, past or present, and you have a sneaking suspicion that this is what if they were quick to say it in an interview, there's a possibility that they will flood the gates within the process. It's just finding who fits well. If a person tells you in an interview that they don't do well with structure, or they need a highly structured environment, or they're not, they were 30 minutes late to the interview and they were late sending something else, and you know that you have an environment that is completely different, why subject you, the company, and them, the applicant, to a situation that you know has a higher probability of failing? It just doesn't make sense. You should not be that desperate to fill a position. So it should be a slow to hire, quick to fire. And what I mean by that is that it should be a courting process to hire. I used to be very frustrated when I would apply for a lot of larger firms for certain positions, and they had 4 and 5 interview processes. Like, I was just so flabbergasted. But what I've come to realize is that those processes help to really find out more about me. This is how they find out how well you will fit in their culture, how well they can train you to to become one with their team. And it's impossible to, within one interview, to say, oh yeah, this person's a perfect fit. No, it's not. It's going to require multiple interviews, and they got to dig in deep, and they need to get to know you. They need to find your personality, because people are always on their best behavior in interviews 1 and 2. But people can start to reveal more about themselves in interviews 3, 4, and 5, right? And so when I said slow to hire, quick to fire, what I mean by quick to fire is this. If you have a person who is an absolute tyrant in your organization, why are you holding on to them? If they are making everyone else dread coming into work, if everyone else's morale and productivity is dropping rapidly, why are you keeping that person? I don't care how valuable you think they are to the company and the role that they serve. If they are destroying the livelihoods and the well-being of your employees, and productivity is dropping, which means that the company is losing money, you need to let that person go. Period, point blank. Because there's certain things that you cannot retrain in a person, in something that is inherently their value system, their belief system, it's their personality. You cannot tell someone to stop feeling the way they do. So if that person is anti-gay, anti-Muslim, multiculturalism, if they're not into interracial dating, things of that nature, stop it. Just save yourself the grief. Get them out of your organization. You don't need to, at that point, then you are intentionally injecting cancer into your organization. Just stop it. So that's what I mean by slow to hire, quick to fire. Now, there are some companies that are quick to hire and quick to fire. Don't apply for company. You have to be very leery if you see that a company, if you get into a company and you find out that you're the 4th person in that position in a year, just be prepared. Just be prepared. Be prepared to be let go. Be prepared to run. Because that means there's something really wrong with the culture of that organization. And that's where a strong HR team can actually help untangle that kind of environment. But when you don't have a strong emphasis on your HR personnel and human resources in general, you will have a lot of toxic cultures and environments that shouldn't be. So finding qualified employees who fit well into the culture of the organization. The recruitment process is also about selling the organization to high-quality prospective candidates. You're not going to spend time selling and pitching how great your company is and how great it is to work for the company to a person who is not qualified, who's not good quality, who's, you sit back and you're wondering whether or not they're going to steal the stapler off your desk, or if you're wondering if they're sizing you up, or if, they're a potential predator or sexual harassment or something. It doesn't make sense to sell the organization to a candidate of that quality at all, right? The same is true if you look and you're talking to them about their resume and you see all these gaps or you see these inconsistencies, and you start seeing that this person's already lying to you in the interview. Don't sell the organization to this person. Find a way to lovingly and discreetly get them out of the door and go on to the next candidate. So we have various recruiting sources that you can use, and Exhibit 9.3 outlines them. Of course, present employees are always great because a present employee can always recommend a friend, family member, neighbor, associate, gym partner, whatever. Their daughter's friend's mother or father or uncle. So present employees are always good recruiting sources. And that's how you can get referrals from those employees as well as former employees. Present employees are also good recruiting sources to be able to promote them in the company. if you see a person who is already doing the job of another job, why not promote them to that new job versus trying to find another candidate to fill the position? You can also recruit online, and you can use external sources other than online approaches, right? So you can use various agencies. And then we have global recruiting, and you can read about that on page 316. So there's various steps that you need to take, you should consider taking when recruiting. Exhibit 9.4 on page 317 talks about the selection process. And then, of course, there's a preliminary screening interview. That's that kind of first level interview where you're, okay, this person seems like, they're not absolutely deranged. And so we'll go ahead and check them out. Then we do the psychological testing. This is how we find out whether or not they are deranged. Are they a sociopath, a psychopath? Do they have the potential of coming in and doing harm to employees or to themselves or to customers? Exhibit 9.5 on page 319 goes into some greater details on these steps. You would look at the job interview, and you can look at some of the guidelines for conducting the interview on page 322, exhibit 9.6. It's very interesting how many people are not good at interviewing and not good at being interviewed. And it's important because I know this for this class that I taught, it was probably 2 years ago. I had students actually create interview questions, and I had the students in class actually conduct interviews. And so they conducted individual as well as group interviews. So they would interview, one person would interview, 3 or more candidates. And then we also had it where we flipped, where we had one person being interviewed by 3 or more interviewers. And so understanding that there's behavioral interviewing where the interviewer is psychologically assessing you based on your behavior and how you respond in the interview, but also how you responded to various scenarios in the workplace and in your personal life, right? So using, how to, finding out how you handle rejection or things of that nature. And so Exhibit 9.7 on page 323, you can actually see the interviewee checklist. And that's a great checklist to use to see how to make sure that you are prepared to be interviewed for a job. Then there's the reference check and the background clearance. This is so amazing to me how many companies don't actually check references and they actually don't do background checks. They say they do, but they don't. And then you wonder why when something crazy happens, you have a fatal attraction situation or someone goes, ballistic and comes in with, weapons and they're, attacking people. And all of a sudden, whoa, the FBI and local law enforcement comes in and they start doing their investigating. And then they say, wow, well, you didn't see that this person had a long history of, emotional stability problems. And you didn't see they had all of these charges for domestic abuse and battery and attempted murder. And you're like, oh, no. Well, you would have known had you done the checks. It's, you're rushing through, you're trying to cut costs, you're trying to hurry fill a position, but what you're doing is you're not realizing how you're impacting the lives within your company. When you put your employees at risk, you put your company at risk. Customers don't want to support companies that are volatile, that potentially can implode or explode. And so your company can actually go out of business. And so that reference check and background clearance is so vital. And it's not to say that you still can't have a person with a clean check, right? And they still don't have some issues. They just were never diagnosed or they were never caught. This can be the case a lot of times with pedophiles and rapists, right? They're just never caught. But it's good to have. so that when something does come up, you'll guess what's going to be on their background check in the future. But at least you can say that you did your due diligence to make sure that they on the surface were a-okay. Physical exam and drug testing. This is also really important, especially when you take in consideration if someone has to physically exert themselves beyond the casual, flipping of papers on their desk and shuffling pencils. You need to make sure that people are physically capable of performing the jobs they need to do and the duties and the tasks. And drug testing, especially if you know that the job is high stressful, or if there's going to be any access to money or to any kind of monetary instruments, including stocks, things of that nature. If they're going to be in an environment that there are products and chemicals that they could get high from. So many different things, right? If they have a history of drug and alcohol abuse that they somehow came forward and told you about. So there's lots of reasons to have drug testing already implemented and embedded in your organization, and so that it's not something that you're just doing as an exception, right? You're not just doing it for one person or a few people, but you're doing it across the board. So that is definitely something that is valuable. The thing is that if you find out that a person is an alcoholic, for instance, and the liability that comes back to you as the company, if they're an alcoholic and you serve alcohol at a company function, they leave that company function and get in a car accident, guess what? Your company is liable. Because not only were you serving alcohol and you clearly, this person was allowed to drink alcohol, but you knew this person was an alcoholic. So it's like a double whammy for your organization. So I'm doing extremes, but just because I want to give you a lot of different variables to consider as to why these things are necessary. And then, of course, cross-cultural selection. You can read about that on 325, and that's really your ability to make sure that you're having a more diverse workforce. So orientation, training, and development. Most organizations no longer have that sink or swim philosophy, right? You're going to either get the job done or you're going to get out. Sometimes I have a sink or swim philosophy with certain elements. And what that means is that after I believe a person has been well oriented into the company and they've been trained and developed properly, and they still want to just skate by, right, on good looks or a fun personality. No, you're going to either get the job done or get out. You're going to either sink or swim. But for a general overarching philosophy, a lot of companies are turning away from this because you're then focusing on orienting your team to the company, training them, developing them, and continuing that training and development throughout the life of their term within the company. So you have an onboarding process, and that's your employee orientation. That is not something, a lot of times I see that people get the onboarding in a few days or a couple of weeks or the first 90 days. It should be something that it's significant, right? Where they really are being embedded within. Would you let someone just move into your house without knowing them? No, it's gonna take some time, and then you're gonna gradually give them access to certain parts of your home, and you may never let them enter your bedroom, right? And so it's the same kind of orientation. Training and development, I've already talked about that. E-learning, that's where you're using computer-based training, and it's used on the web, on the internet. What you're doing with this video is e-learning, right? Development is a form of personal improvement. It usually consists of enhancing knowledge and skills of various complex and unstructured nature. And on pages 328 to 330, you can actually see a needs assessment and how to select appropriate training programs for your organization. On page 329, there's Exhibit 9.8, and that's going to show you a sample listing of training versus development programs. Now, some of you have heard either appraisals or performance evaluation in your workplace. And that's a formal system where you're able to measure, evaluate, and review the performance of your employees. And it's very important. And if it's not being done in your company, you really should be asking yourself why. A lot of people will do just a yearly evaluation. And I don't like the yearly evaluations if that's the only time they're being evaluated. Because at that point, then you're measuring and evaluating and reviewing me one time a year. So that means that I'm not going to be measured and evaluated or reviewed until the following year. Well, that's not fair because my job could be resting upon how well I improve from year to year. So if you're actually doing an evaluation every month or every quarter, then guess what? I have room to improve and to be able to make necessary changes. So by the time I do my year-end evaluation, you can actually show and measure and evaluate and review my performance over the entire course of the year. And then guess what? Each year, you can then see how I'm improving or not each year. Then you'll look at task performance, citizenship performance, and counterproductive performance. And that's how well you perform a task. Your citizenship, how are your sportsman-like qualities? If you're a team player, if you're the first to participate or not, all right? And your counterproductive performance. What are you doing to sabotage the efforts of the company? That's just to keep it blunt. And then, of course, there's a purpose for this. It's to decide whether an employee should be able to get a pay increase, get a promotion, and how large that increase or promotion should be, right? Is it just a couple of dollars? Is it a few cents on the dollar? Is it something considerably larger? Do they go from, frontline to middle management? Where does that entail? And so you can read more about this process on pages 330 to 333. Now, compensation and benefits. Of course, all employees love this, right? My ability to make more money and I get some extra perks on the side. And so the way you figure these out is through job evaluation. How much of a job should receive so much in wages or pay? What are you doing within that job that enforces the mindset that you should get paid a certain amount? And then variable pay is partially dependent on your performance, how well you perform the job. It then also plays a factor in how much you're paid. Stack ranking. This is where your manager will rank you within the unit, like 1 to 10 or A to Z, and then raises and bonuses are then dispersed accordingly. There's some negatives to this, of course, because if there's any favoritism, if that manager does not like you, guess what? You will rarely, if ever, get a raise or a bonus, right? Because they're always going to rank you towards the bottom, and they're going to always rank their favorite towards the top. And if they have a relationship with the person at the top and they don't disclose this conflict of interest, guess what? Ugh. So stack ranking has pluses and minuses with that as well. And then, of course, employee benefit. These are all non-cash payments. These are different benefits that you receive. And Exhibit 9.9 on page 336 shows you some of those various benefits. Now, the labor union. Some people cringe the labor unions. Interesting, in the political climate that we have right now in our country, you have more and more people who are becoming anti-labor, and it's very, very disheartening because labor unions influence almost all HR programs and practices whenever a public or private organization is unionized. And the thing is the labor union is very, very invested in the employee, and making sure that the employee is not being discriminated against, is being represented well, is not facing any retaliation, has fair representation in the legal system, so on and so forth. And the thing is the reason why you have people who are going against labor unions is because guess what? When the labor union speaks on behalf of the employee, you can't ignore them, right? You can ignore an employee, a one person kind of thing, and one person's complaining or whatever. Okay, great. You can find a way to shush them away or just get rid of them altogether. But when you have a labor union, guess what? Then that union is now going to start doing investigation to see and to do their due diligence to see who else is being negatively impacted. And then at that point, you could have one employee that can turn into 20, 30, 100 plus employees. And that's why you end up having some disagreements that can lead to strikes and so forth. And because they are trying to negotiate certain terms, and that union is working desperately to help make sure that those employees get what they deserve or desire. So the main purpose is, of course, to attain fair treatment for workers as it deals with compensation, and that includes your retirement benefits, your health benefits, making sure that you have safe working conditions, that your working hours are not crazy, that they are fair, that your hours are not being cut because of retaliation practices, that you have a sense of job security, and that there are some work-life programs that are there to benefit you and your well-being and to nurture you as an individual. So on pages 337 and 338, you can read more about labor unions. If you have any questions, please email me at nbryant@atlantatech.edu. Make sure that for your assignment that you pay close attention to what I put inside of the workspace. All right. And that is a wrap. I look forward to hearing back from you. If you have any feedback, any questions, if it's some really good questions, I may be able to follow up with a video lecture so I can just do a blanket response, and so that other people can benefit as well. All right. Have a great day.